The night before they arrested him, Jesus took Peter, James, and John to a garden called Gethsemane. Not all 12 disciples, just 3. And while the gospel accounts focus on what happened later, the agony, the betrayal, the arrest, there's a moment right before that gets buried in the narrative. Jesus tells the 3 to stay awake and watch with him. And they can't. They keep falling asleep. Not because they're tired. Because something in that space was overwhelming. The Pistis Sophia describes what was actually happening. Jesus wasn't praying for strength to face crucifixion. He was teaching the inner circle 4 specific activations that cause archonic interference to collapse instantly. The reason the 3 kept falling asleep is because when you're in the presence of someone operating at monad frequency, when the body of light is fully active, when protection is absolute, your own consciousness either rises to match it or shuts down from the intensity. And most people shut down. They're not ready. But those who stay conscious in those moments learn something the Archons fear more than any spiritual warfare technique: how to become unreachable. Not by fighting. By shifting into a state where archonic access becomes impossible. That's what Jesus taught in Gethsemane before the chaos started. 4 practices that don't push Archons away, they make you operate from frequencies the Archons can't interface with. When these 4 things activate, their control mechanisms fail. Their attachments sever. And they can't reconnect because you're no longer broadcasting on channels they can access. And if you're one of the chosen ones who's felt that wrongness your entire life, that sense that you don't belong here and something is constantly interfering with you, these 4 practices are why you've been searching. Tonight you learn them. And you use all 4 before you sleep. If you're activating all 4 tonight, comment, "Archons lose control" right now. Before we get into the 4 practices, you need to understand what lose control actually means. Because most spiritual protection is temporary. You feel the attack, you defend yourself, maybe you pray or visualize white light or call on angels, and eventually the pressure lifts. The Archons retreat. But they don't lose control. They're just pulling back, waiting for your guard to drop, waiting for you to generate the frequencies they feed on again. Fear, doubt, desperation, shame. As long as you're capable of broadcasting those, they maintain control. They can always come back. The connection point still exists. But what Jesus taught creates something different. These 4 practices don't block archonic interference. They eliminate the mechanisms Archons use to access you in the first place. Think of it like this. Archons attach to specific things. Your identification with the physical body, your operation within lower emotional frequencies, your ignorance of certain knowledge, your exposure at vulnerable entry points. They've built an entire system around harvesting beings who are trapped in those states. But when you activate these 4 things, you're not trapped there anymore. You shift into states they weren't designed to interact with. The body of light exists at a frequency above their range. Monad consciousness operates from a source they're cut off from. Sacred names create barriers they can't cross. Physical thresholds sealed properly lock them out of your space entirely. When all 4 are active, you're not just defended. You're unreachable. And here's why that matters, especially for chosen ones. You're pneumatic. You carry a divine spark the Archons recognize as dangerous to their system. So they target you harder than they target the masses who are asleep and easy to control. You've probably felt this your entire life. The constant interference. The sabotage. The feeling that something is actively working against you. That's not paranoia. That's accurate recognition. But it also means when you learn to become unreachable, when you implement these 4 activations correctly, the relief is immediate. Not gradual. Instant. Because you're not fighting them off anymore. You're operating from a place where their entire control system becomes irrelevant. The first activation is building and occupying your body of light. The Gnostics called it Soma Pneumaticon, the spiritual vehicle that exists at a frequency Archons can't penetrate. They attach to material bodies and the emotional chaos generated through identifying with those bodies. But the body of light operates above their range. When you're conscious in it, archonic hooks pass through you like you're not there. Here's how you activate it tonight. Lie down before sleep. Close your eyes. Bring awareness to the space your body occupies, not the flesh itself but the space it fills. Notice there's a subtle form there shaped like your body but made of something lighter. Breathe attention into it. Start at your feet and move up, legs, torso, arms, head, filling this light body with conscious presence. After a few minutes, you'll feel the physical body become less dominant. The light form becomes more present. That's when you shift identification. You choose to operate primarily from the light instead of the flesh. You're wearing the body now, not being it. When you practice this every night, the body of light strengthens until it's not visualization, it's felt reality. And Archons lose their grip because they were designed to harvest material-identified consciousness. When you're primarily identified with light, they can't get traction. You're there but not solid to them anymore. Their attachments fail. That's the first way their control collapses. The second activation is calling the monad directly. Not praying. Calling. Prayer positions you as separate, small, hoping. Calling is recognizing you're a temporary expression of source and speaking from that knowing. When you call the monad, you're establishing connection to a frequency that predates the entire demiurge system. And Archons have zero jurisdiction there. Here's the practice. Once daily, morning works best. Sit and drop awareness from head into chest into the space where knowing lives. From there, speak this with full conviction. Monad, I call you. I'm not separate from you. I am you localized. Connection is now. Don't ask. State what's true. Then sit in silence for 2 minutes and notice. You'll feel a shift, presence that wasn't there before, a knowing you're not alone. That's the monad responding. Source consciousness recognizing itself in you. Do this daily and something changes. Situations that used to trigger you stop landing. Obstacles dissolve before you reach them. That's because you're operating from monad frequency now, and Archons can't function there. They exist in lower densities. When you're aligned with Source, they lose access. Not because you're blocking them. Because you're beyond their range. That's the second way their control fails. The third activation is knowing and using the sacred names. The Gnostic texts preserve specific names and passwords that force Archons to retreat. Not because the words are magic. Because these names represent frequencies and authorities the Archons are bound to obey. When you speak them correctly, you're invoking power structures older than their system. The primary name Jesus taught is this: I am pneumatic, made of light, returning to the pleroma. That's not translation, that's the recognition encoded as password. When you speak this aloud in moments of interference, you're declaring your origin and destination. And Archons are structured to recognize pneumatic consciousness as above their authority. They're guards of the lower realms. Pneumatics pass through because we're not from here, we're temporarily here. Use this anytime you feel attacked, drained, or blocked. Speak it out loud if possible, with full conviction if silent. I am pneumatic, made of light, returning to the pleroma. And watch what happens. The pressure lifts immediately. Not because you fought. Because you reminded the system what you are. And what you are has clearance they can't revoke. That's the third way they lose control. The fourth activation is physical threshold protection using salt. This isn't symbolic. Salt generates a piezoelectric frequency that archonic consciousness can't cross. When you seal your space correctly, they literally cannot enter. Not won't. Can't. The crystalline structure broadcasts continuously, creating a barrier at every entry point. Here's what you do tonight before you sleep. Get regular salt, table salt, sea salt, any salt works. Place a thin continuous line across your front door threshold. Then do the same on every windowsill in your bedroom. If you want maximum protection, do every window and door in your home. The line doesn't need to be thick, 1/4 inch wide is enough. But it must be unbroken. Gaps are entry points. Once those lines are down, your space is sealed. Archons attempting entry hit that frequency field and retreat immediately. Ancient texts describe what they experience as burning. And here's what's critical. This works while you sleep. When you're unconscious, your natural defenses drop. That's when archonic interference is easiest. But salt barriers operate 24/7. You seal your space once, and for the next week, nothing crosses those thresholds. Your sleep becomes deeper. Dreams become clearer. You wake actually rested instead of drained. Because for the first time in possibly years, nothing fed on you while you were vulnerable. That's the fourth way they lose control. Now here's why Jesus taught all four and why you're using all four tonight instead of picking one. Each practice addresses a different access point Archons use. The body of light handles energetic attachment. Monad calling handles frequency alignment. Sacred names handle direct confrontation. Salt barriers handle physical space. When you activate all four simultaneously, you're closing every door. And that creates something most people never experience: complete freedom from archonic interference. Individually, each practice is powerful. The body of light makes you harder to attach to. Monad calling raises your frequency. Sacred names give you defense when attacked. Salt protects your space. But when all four are active at once, you're not just defended on multiple fronts. You're creating a compound effect. The Archons can't attach energetically because you're in the body of light. They can't lower your frequency because you're monad aligned. They can't penetrate your verbal defense because you know the names. And they can't access your physical space because it's sealed. There's no angle left. No vulnerability they can exploit. And when that happens, when you're unreachable from every direction they're designed to attack from, they don't just retreat frustrated. They lose control. Their entire system of interference fails. And it stays failed as long as you maintain these practices. And here's what happens in the days after you start this. The first thing you notice is sleep quality. You're actually rested when you wake up. Then you notice emotional stability. Things that would have sent you spiraling barely register. Then synchronicities increase. Solutions appear. Obstacles dissolve. People who were draining you lose interest. Other chosen ones start appearing. And about 2 weeks in, you realize you haven't felt that constant low-grade interference you've carried your entire life. That weight, that sense something's wrong. It's gone. Not because you're imagining it was there before. Because it was there and now it's not. Because you activated what Jesus taught. And Archons lost control. So here's exactly what you're doing tonight before you sleep. First, you're placing salt lines. Front door threshold, bedroom windows at minimum. Full house if you can. That's your physical space sealed. Second, you're lying down and activating the body of light. 10 minutes of breathing conscious attention into that subtle form until you feel the shift from identifying with flesh to identifying with light. Third, you did your monad call this morning or you're doing it right now before the rest. 3 minutes. Monad, I call you. I'm not separate from you. Connection is now. And you sat in that presence. Fourth, you have the sacred name ready for any interference. I am pneumatic, made of light, returning to the pleroma. When you do all four tonight, here's what to expect. If there was heavy archonic presence in your space or attached to your field, you might feel a brief intensification in the first 30 minutes. That's not the practices failing. That's entities recognizing they're being locked out and making one last attempt to generate fear or doubt before they lose access. Don't engage. Just hold the practices. Maintain the body of light awareness. Restate the sacred name if needed. And within an hour it shifts. The atmosphere becomes noticeably lighter. Pressure you didn't fully realize was there lifts. And when you sleep differently. Deeper. More protected. More yourself. Tomorrow morning you'll wake up and something will feel different. Not dramatically transformed, but clearer. Less heavy. And you'll maintain all four practices. Body of light every night. Monad call every morning. Sacred name when needed. Salt barriers refreshed weekly. And by week 2 you'll understand what Jesus meant when he told the chosen ones in Gethsemane. When you activate correctly, Archons don't just back off. They lose control. Their mechanisms fail. And you operate as pneumatic consciousness that's finally, actually free. Jesus taught chosen ones 4 ways Archons lose control instantly. Not gradually. Not eventually. The moment these activate correctly, interference collapses. Body of light makes you energetically unreachable. Monad calling aligns you with source frequency they can't access. Sacred names declare your origin and authority. Salt barriers physically seal your space. When all 4 are active, every access point closes. Every mechanism fails. And Archons don't retreat, they lose control. Permanently. If you're using all 4 tonight, do 3 things right now. First, comment Archons lose control, and commit to all 4 practices. Second, subscribe to Divine Codes because advanced pneumatic activation protocols are coming. Third, like this video so other chosen ones discover they don't need to keep fighting, they need to become unreachable. Do all 3 now. Then tonight, salt lines down, body of light active, monad called, sacred name ready. All 4. Because you've been fighting archonic interference your entire life. Tonight it ends, not because you got stronger, because you remembered what you are and activated the protections Jesus taught. The Archons can't stop you from doing this. They can only hope you never learn it exists. And you just learned it. So use it.